So thanks, Hannah. And can you hear me okay? Great. So I wanted first to hand out some thank yous. The first one is to everybody who's taking the time to spend an hour with us today. It's really crucial to me that we have an opportunity to get together for Catherine and I to be able to talk with you, be able to answer questions, make sure that we're keeping you informed about what we're doing. And so I really appreciate the fact that you're taking some time out of your day to spend it with us. It's awfully important. Second, I wanted to thank Hannah and Shelby and Chris and Dylan, who have been serving in leadership roles for Staff Council to be able to support these type of events, but not just to be able to support this. They've been supporting you throughout the course of the whole semester and the entire year. Shared governance is important, and that universities are a little bit of a strange workplace in the sense that there's lots of organizations out there that don't have representation that is there to be able to voice the concerns, to make sure that you're heard, and to be able to bring things to our attention when we're not considering something, or if we need to take a different approach. And they've done a remarkable job of being able to represent you. So please do continue to engage with them on Staff Council and make sure that your voice is getting heard through those representatives because they work awfully hard on your behalf. And then I also just wanted to thank all of you for what you've been doing over the course of this whole year. Since last March, we've been in a really unusual place. We've got people who are working remotely, and that comes with its own challenges, both personally and professionally. Many of you have kids who are trying to do remote learning at the same time that you're trying to be able to work from home. And I've been in that boat, and I know that it's a challenge. But every day people are showing up, they're meeting the mission of the university. We've had a lot of time where we have focused on what are the challenges, and maybe we haven't done enough to be able to celebrate the successes. There are thousands of students who are able to move forward towards their degrees. We were able to maintain the continuity of people being able to work and to be able to do the things that they are doing in their own units, and that's been wonderful. So thank you for all that you've done there. As we approach the holidays, want to make sure that you're getting some time for yourself. This has been a challenging year, hectic year, stressful year. This is really time that you need to be able to have for you to be able to recharge. Make sure that you're spending time with your family. Make sure that you're in a position where when we do come back in the spring, that we'll be able to continue to move the university's mission forward. And you've earned your paid time off. So make sure you use it. And a lot of your supervisors have granted admin leave during the last week of December. Please take that time and use it if you can. Wanted to start by, in terms of substance, really going through and talking a little bit about some of the announcements that you've seen from spring. We know that we're going to have a remote start to begin the semester, and we announced that we're not going to be doing things like having an in-person commencement. And I wanted to take a few minutes to really walk you through why, let you know where things stand, and to be in a position to try to answer some questions up front that you may have had. So I'm going to share my screen, and Hannah, can you let me know if I managed to successfully do it? Because even though we've been living in Zoom world for months, I still managed to screw it up. So did I get the slides up? Yep. Thank you. Okay, so here's where we start, which is both for the university and even more in terms of how we've been living our life. COVID's had a really significant impact over the last several months. And what you can see here are the case rates that have existed really since last spring until now. And what you're going to find is that Boulder County is the red line. And you can see that all throughout the spring and through the summer, the line remained pretty stable. And then we had a period of time in September into October where we had a sharp spike, really in Boulder County compared to the other uh, counties in the Denver metro area. And that was the infection that was taking place in the 18 to 22-year-old population, a large number of CU students. And there were some public health orders that got entered at that point in time in order to be able to address that outbreak of infection. After that happened and things returned pretty much to baseline, there was then a really sharp rise of infection all across the Denver metro area. And Boulder actually had some of the lower case rates in the entire county, but they were extraordinarily high compared to where they had been before. The good news is that those rates have started to come down. They haven't gone down far enough yet, but that they're headed in the right direction. The other thing that I'm pretty happy about is that if you look at the tail end of the graph in red, you can see that they went up a little bit after Thanksgiving, but we didn't get that huge spike that some of the people in the healthcare community were really fearful that we would get, that was going to have significantly adverse outcomes in the community. So if we continue to maintain that type of trend where the disease rates are going down, that bodes well for us, not just in terms of overall community health, but also in terms of the campus. So the next thing I wanted to show you is where things stand currently. And Boulder County is in level red of the COVID dial. One of the things that's important to think about right now is when we were talking about returning in the fall or making decisions last spring, we were doing it without the benefit of much guidance from the state. People were looking at the university and saying, what are going to be the decision makers or decision points that you're going to use to be able to decide whether or not to have in-person classes? How are you going to decide whether or not to bring students back to the residence halls? And since then, the state has come up with a COVID dial, and that COVID dial really is governing how we're thinking about how we can operate, both in terms of the activities we have on campus, what kind of instruction can be offered to students, and how we maintain the workforce. Level purple is the equivalent of a true stay-at-home, and a county would only be put into level purple if the healthcare resources in the community were in crisis mode, where they were unable to be able to accommodate in terms of hospital beds, ventilators, ICU beds, the demand in the community. And we're not there in Boulder County, and we're actually not really close in Boulder County. Level red, where we are now, is really restrictive. And in order to get out of level red, we need to have infections in the community return down to a rate of less than 350 people per 100,000 residents in the county. As of yesterday, that number was 572 and a half, which is way too high, but is super way better than where we were even just a few weeks ago when it was way over 800 in Boulder County. And so things are continuing to head in the right direction. So I'm really encouraged about that because it means that we might be able to return sooner rather than later to level orange, which not only allows us to be able to do more on the campus, it also means that things will free up a little bit within the community. This is a graph that shows what the infection rates were by age groups. And this one's somewhat interesting. You can see that this blue line, dark blue, is the 18 to 22-year-old population. And it had a super steep curve in that September, October timeframe so far that we couldn't keep it in scale on the chart. And then it dropped way back down. It then went back up in the most recent surge, but now the rates of infection in that 18 to 22-year-old population are down, and that's a good thing. We've normalized with the rest of the community. We're going to have to watch that carefully as students will be returning to the Boulder community and returning to campus. But if we can keep it at a normalized rate, that also bodes well for us going forward. For healthcare resources in the Boulder community, you can see that none of them currently are in the red capacity. There's ventilators that are in place that are available. There's available medical surgical beds. There's available ICU beds. All of this is good. It means that we're not overburdening the healthcare resources in the community. One of the things that we know is that when we had our student outbreak, there were a decent number of cases that occurred, but that they weren't really causing a lot of infection at a level where it was leading people to need hospitalization or to otherwise burden the healthcare resources. As the infection's been more diffuse in the community, affecting all age groups and really much broader in terms of populations, those healthcare resources have been more taxed, but those rates are starting to become a little bit more normal. All of this really depends, though, about what our future is coming into the spring upon the ability for people to remain socially distant. As we've talked at length, we've got COVID testing on campus, we do contact tracing, vaccine is starting to be distributed. But right now, social distance and proper masking are the number one tools that can help us return infections back to normal. Actually, that sounds terrible. Infections are never normal, but return the infection rates closer to the baseline that we saw. Right now, Colorado as a state is at 48% in terms of what their social distancing behaviors are. That's down from the about 82% in April, but it's up from that 29% in October when you really saw the disease spike. Essentially, people let their guards down, and that's what really spiked the infection. We're actually doing better than the state overall in Boulder County, and we're at 56%, which is significantly higher than what the statewide average is. And that's one of the reasons why Boulder County's infection curve has been better than what it is in the other Denver metro area counties. So one of the messages is for, if you're talking to people, please encourage them to continue the social distancing. It's making a big impact in the community. And it ultimately affects CEU because when we're in level red, it's got a couple of big decision points for us. The first is that in terms of instructional mode that you see down at the bottom of the screen, we're in level red. The presumption is coming from the Department of Public Health and Environment is that we are in remote instructional status. There's a little clause there that says limited in-person when necessary, but the state has really construed that as being a exception rather than the rule, that we should not be having much in the way of in-person classes. And that's what led us to make the determination that we needed to start remotely in the spring. The other thing that's really significant in level red is the personal gathering requirement. And in level red, that is none, so that people aren't supposed to be engaged in social contact outside of their own households. And if you think of an environment like the residence halls, their households are defined as their individual dorm room. And basically the students would not be able to return to campus and be able to have social interaction with each other outside of their own dorm rooms. And we know from the orders that got imposed last spring or last fall, that really was mentally burdensome on the population. And we don't want to return them to campus under conditions where we know that it's not good for their mental health. The other place where it has impact is on our ability to do things like host events, such as commencement. And the best that we got during the fall semester was into level yellow, which for a place like Folsom Field means that we could only operate it at 50% capacity or in pods of 175 people with separate entrances, bathrooms, those type of things. What we're really hopeful for is that as time goes on and the infection rates go down in the community, we'll be able to have more events, be able to create good social interactions on campus and in the community, but that under any circumstances, it didn't look like we were going to get to the point where we'd be able to stage an event like commencement that would bring together 10, 20, even more thousands of people, just not safe. We've been asked some questions about vaccine and what it's going to mean for the community. And the good news is, as you've probably seen, vaccine has started to be distributed in Colorado, but it's not going to solve all of our problems right out of the gates. The first population that is going to be prioritized for vaccine distribution in the winter are going to be people who are frontline healthcare workers dealing with COVID patients, as well as those people who are living in the long-term residential care facilities, nursing homes. That's the place that the most vulnerability occurs and where almost all of the deaths in Boulder County can be linked back to. So that population gets prioritized first. Then other healthcare workers and first responders are going to be prioritized second. That's really going to be the people who get vaccine in the first several months of the distribution. Sometime in the spring, we'll hit phase two, and that will be people who are aged 65 and older, as well as mainly people who have comorbidities that predispose them to get seriously ill if they contract COVID. What that ultimately means, though, is that for the general public, which is almost all of our student population, almost all of our faculty, and the majority of our staff, that vaccine really won't start making an impact on that community until the summertime. And so this is going to be something that we're going to be working our way through in the spring semester, but that vaccine and the availability of it really isn't going to change our pathway much for how we're thinking about the spring semester. Ultimately, the place we want to be in is that once we have people returning to campus, we want to be able to do that safely, but we also want to do it in a way that reduces uncertainty. We heard throughout the course of the last semester that it was the back and forth, that we're in person, we're remote, that there are social gatherings, no, there's not. That shifting back and forth created anxiety, and it created people feeling like they had their personal and professional lives in chaos. And our goal now is to try to reduce the amount of uncertainty. And once we bring people back, to make sure that we can stay in person. Some people have been worried about the remote start and what it means in terms of employment. We don't anticipate any significant layoffs or increased furloughs because of the remote start. And one of the things we know we need to do is to be able to bring those students back safely for the remainder of the semester. As we do that, I'd like to ask all of you to help us where you can. Keep being safe in your own households, but also we have expanded the COVID testing. Anyone with a Buff1 card can come to campus and get tested, not just for you, but for your family members too. That's a great tool to be able to use if you are going to be visiting family over the holidays, if you're going to be engaged in interactions with others, to try to know that you can do that as safely as possible. So please take advantage of that capability if you can. It's really easy, and I came up with my family and did it. Can't say enough about the people who've worked to make that available. Other things that are important to me is I know with this group that's been largely working remotely that this has been hard, it's been stressful, everything's been upside down, and that you don't have the opportunity to be able to be part of the campus in the same way that you were before. And it's harder to maintain connections with your coworkers and others. We've recently put together an engagement team that is going to be looking at these questions. And ultimately, this is crucially important. We know that engagement and having people who feel like that they've got a workplace that matters to them, that their work contributes and adds value, it leads to people wanting to remain with our community, and it enables the campus to be successful. Right now, maintaining those connections are hard, and we know we need to work on it. But I really want to, again, thank you for what you've done. Thank you for the work that you've done with your supervisors in order to to keep things going and to be able to answer your questions. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Catherine, but this is a good opportunity. I hope some of this information has been helpful.
Thank you, Pat. And thanks. I think that presentation was really beneficial to see, and it really sort of frames the world that we're living in right now as far as a community that's working together. I would like to pick up on where Pat ended with talking about engagement. But before I do that, I also want to extend some sincere thank yous to our staff council, to Chris and Shelby and Dylan and Hannah and all of staff council for putting on these incredible events like today, where we have over 500 people participating. And also for the behind the scenes work that maybe you all don't get to see as much, which is how diligent they have been in, particularly during the pandemic, in raising issues that matter to staff and making sure that the administration is aware and is paying attention and is addressing those issues. So thank you so much to staff council. And then I also want to reiterate Pat's thank you to all of you. If you had asked me 9 months ago if we could have pulled this off in the remote environment that we switched to overnight, I wouldn't have believed where we are. I think for all the difficulties and challenges we've faced, we have been unbelievably successful. And that is a tribute to all of you and all of our partners who are working on campus to make that happen during this time. So I feel fortunate to be able to actually say thank you to all of you who are participating today and to all of our employees on campus. Now let me talk about engagement for a minute, because I will tell you that of all the things I hear from our remote workers, this is by far and above the most important issue that comes up for you. And when I think of the various ways I hear it, it's all over the map. I mean, I'll start by saying, for some people, this remote environment works really, really well. And it's been great and they love it. For others, even for those, but for others, there have been significant challenges. And just some of the challenges that I hear are the Zoom fatigue that we all feel, but also the sense of missing community, like Pat talked about, missing being able to be together. I'm sure that's been profound for all of you. It's certainly been profound for me. Beyond that, though, you know, we know of the challenges that parents are facing with children at home, and the flip-flop of schools being on and off, and how to manage all that, and the challenges that causes personally at home. I also want to acknowledge that with this pandemic in place, many of us, if not all of us, are facing personal challenges that we don't necessarily see in each other in the work environment. And I think it's really important to remember that, and to be kind and generous with each other when someone's having a bad day or something, because it has been challenging and there are personal challenges we don't know about. Sorry, I have someone at my door. But then also, I want to talk about ways to combat some of the challenges that we've seen. And I want to remind you that there are huge engagement opportunities on campus right now. On the day after we went remote in March, the professional development team in HR that provides all the training and professional development to all of you moved their entire operation online. And so there are still many, many professional development opportunities. In fact, the full slew that they were offering before are being offered now. And so think about taking time to work on your own professional development, your own career interests, check out what's available on the website, and see what's there. That's one opportunity for engagement. Also, the Faculty and Staff Assistance Program is offering different support groups. I know they've been running one for parents, so it's always a good idea to check to see what they have available. And then I also want to mention just the Faculty and Staff Assistance Program in general. They're offering open hours every week in addition to scheduled hours. They're able to see people through telehealth. So if you think you would benefit from meeting and having sessions with the Faculty and Staff Assistance Program, please, by all means, check that out. And as you see, Lisa is putting these links in as we talk about them. There are other ways to be engaged, and we've really been talking to supervisors and your HR liaisons in your departments about some of these. So for example, performance management and planning, and using this as a time to stay engaged with employees. So hopefully you're seeing this. We've encouraged supervisors to, number one, relax on the requirements, the duties, the normal duties that people have, because duties have changed in some cases drastically since we've moved remote. But we're also encouraging supervisors to use this as a chance to really check in with employees. So if you're seeing that, I'm thrilled to hear it. If you're not, and ask your supervisors to provide some of that to you. We know that getting feedback and being able to plan and think about the future is really important. On that planning piece, you know, the presentation that Pat just gave us, I think it really ends on a hopeful note. Not only have we done, I think, a really good job in the county and at the university of bringing the rates down, but we now have the possibility of vaccines. So I think planning for the future, planning for when your work will return to be more normal, and working with your supervisors on that can be a really hopeful and positive thing to do. Pat mentioned your leave. Don't forget that you do have your leave to use. And I think sometimes we feel like when we're in this environment that you can't take time away. You're already home. Well, that's not true. We know that it's really, really important to take that time away, even though you are already at home. Just to step away from the work can really be rejuvenating. So take time to do that for yourself. Those are, there's also, I want to mention there's an events calendar. If you're not aware of it, CU has an events calendar. You should check that out for events and opportunities to engage with your coworkers on campus. There are many things in there. I just pulled it up today. The Natural Science Museum has some cool stuff going on. There's a holiday festival, many things, many opportunities to participate. A lot of times you'll see even the HR trainings listed in there. So just some thoughts for you around how to stay engaged, and to thank you again for everything that you have done. I know many of you are also wondering, when will we be back? And obviously we don't have the answer to that, but we're starting to feel hopeful about that, as Pat mentioned. So HR will be looking to put out guidance for departments on how to bring people back in the most effective way, and also whether to. I think it's really important to recognize that we've learned some significant lessons from this remote experience. And so we'll be looking at how do we finesse and find just that right balance of when it makes sense to have some people working remotely, some people working on campus in the future. So stay tuned for more on that. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Hannah.
Perfect. Thank you both. I know that answered a lot of the pre-submitted questions that we did have. By far, the most submitted question that we had during registration does have to do with continuing remote work after the period of COVID, after when it is safe to return back to work. So I'm wondering if you guys can touch on, will remote working options be considered after COVID?
Yeah, I think the short answer is that we have to explore that. We learned that there, as Catherine described, that a lot of people have been able to work really successfully remotely. And so I don't think that we're ever going to be in a position to say that things are going to go back 100% to the way they were pre-COVID. it's going to change the way that we think about work and how we work going forward. But I do think that that's something we're going to have to figure out on I don't want to say a case by case basis, but really looking at, okay, as it becomes safer to do it, and what do we need to do to be able to best support the mission of the university? So we're going to have to look at all of those questions, but I would anticipate that there will be more people working remotely in the future than we have had in the past, but that there will also be supervisors who make decisions that say, I really need to have some people who have been off campus come back to help support the mission, and we'll have to work our way through that. But it'll be nice to have the option to have those conversations, because we've heard from some people that they really like working remotely, and we've heard from others that they can't wait to get back.
And I would just add that it will not be a one size fits all, right? We're not going to have a campus policy that anybody that wants to work remotely can work remotely, and anybody that wants to work on campus can work on campus. It really needs to be a strategic decision, looking at each and every unit and what makes sense for that unit. And so there will be work to be done with supervisors and appointing authorities and administrators over your areas to decide how to best manage that. And then, of course, a piece of it too, I think, as Pat mentioned, will be, where are you able to be most successful? So all those factors need to be taken into consideration.
Great, thank you. Kind of along the same lines, someone asks, are there monetary considerations for resources or reimbursements to better support remote work, i.e. new router, modem, faster internet, office supplies, headphones? And then someone comments, I've had to upgrade my internet plan, router, and modem to better collaborate with colleagues. Is there any talk about reimbursement for this work expense?
So far, there hasn't been. And that is something that I understand. It's imposed some burden, but that right now we're in a situation where we're in budget contraction. If we were looking at those type of reimbursements broadly, I don't know whether we would be able to not avoid deeper cuts within the units themselves. So if people have expenses that they want to talk to their supervisors about, they can, but I don't think that we're anticipating any type of broad reimbursement programs.
We had another comment that's it's just a comment. It says they'd like to see a mobile IT unit that can come to my home and deal with computer issues. Has there been any talk of that, or just curious your thoughts on that?
This is the first time I've heard it. It sounds logical, but I don't want to commit OIT to something without having run it by them. The other thing that we may be able to do is through the existing IT helplines is to have people try to call in, get guidance. There may be things that we can do short of having people do home visits to help improve technology through the expertise that we have already in OIT available.
Great. Next question is, as FFCRA expires December 31st, 2020, will there be a replacement for FFCRA like accommodations available spring 2021 and beyond?
Catherine, do you want to respond
Sure.
on that one?
Yeah, that's a good question. And just to give you a little data on it, or well, maybe let me start with making sure people know what FFCRA is. FFCRA was the Family First Coronavirus Response Act put in place by the federal government back in spring. And its purpose was really to make sure that both people that were impacted by the COVID virus medically, but also that were impacted through childcare because their schools closed, had some job protection and some paid leave. I think the reason it's coming up right now is it's set to expire on December 31st. I will share with you that on the Boulder campus, we currently have 35 employees who are using the FFCRA. And we have, I think, same number of researchers, and then just a handful of teaching faculty. We are looking at what options there are, and certainly recognize the need to and the desire to be able to help our employees into the new semester. The state has actually, so even though the FFCRA, the federal, is expiring, the state has created some leave availability for childcare. And it's also expanded the ability to use not only annual leave, but sick leave, which has not been an option to us until now. And so we're looking at those as well as other potential options, and should have some guidance out to you soon on that.
Great. This next question is also for you, Catherine. Can you explain what is happening with the spring break holiday and how it interacts with the wellness days?
Okay, so many of you probably are aware that when we came out with a calendar for students, we created a student wellness day on March 26th. I think many of you are also aware that traditionally CU Boulder has recognized the Friday of the normal spring break week as a holiday for staff. That happens to be Friday, March 26th, so 25th, 26th. So no decision has been made yet about exactly how to move forward on this. The one thing I can tell you is that you will have a holiday. A team of us are meeting on this very issue and should have guidance out to you really soon. So stay tuned on that. I may have jumped the gun a little bit in the last town hall in suggesting that the 26th was sort of a done deal as staying. I guess maybe I need to pull that back a little bit and say, stay tuned. We'll get something final in writing as soon as we can to you on that. But there will be a holiday.
Great, thank you. All right, this next question. Academic advisors are a reliable and trusted resource for students, and often where students go first and foremost for info or planning around campus announcements. Sadly, we have had students reach out to us about campus changes before advisors were even notified, and so we were caught off guard. How does campus leadership plan to include advising leadership in strategic planning and release of information prior to campus-wide release?
So that's a good question, and I apologize that you've been caught in that position. A lot of that advising is taking place through the schools and colleges, so we'll have to work more closely with the communications team to be able to do that, and to make sure that as those type of decisions are being made, that we're communicating it up front with deans and vice chancellors to make sure it's getting to you first. So thanks for pointing that out, and we'll work with strategic relations and the academic uplines to make sure that that's occurring.
Okay. The next question is about parking. Can better parking options be provided for staff that still occasionally need to come to campus, but were bus riders pre-COVID?
So the short answer is, I think so. Carla Hoa, our CFO, Parking Services, reports up to her. We know that with the decreased density of campus, that's something that we're looking at. So we'll be communicating some options on that soon.
Great. So this is kind of a two-part question. Do you foresee the furloughs being extended past September 2021? And then for those of us on a 5% pay cut, how long can we expect that to continue? If it does, will we continue to have our furlough days?
So the short answer is that I hope that we will be able to rescind those furloughs at the end of before the next academic year starts, before next September. That's absolutely something we want to do. And a lot of it is going to be dependent on what budget is and what enrollment is. But the good news is that so far, our applications for next year are significantly trended in the right direction, are up by double digits across the entire campus. If that holds true, and particularly once the vaccine and other things get us back to where we can offer a more normal experience, I think that's really going to help our budget situation, and reversing those furloughs will be one of the highest priorities if we have the budget to do it. The other thing that we also are hopeful for is that if the state budget holds up, and right now there are some recommended increases for higher education, that will help us to be able to restore that budget stability for the upcoming year.
Great. How will performance plans be modified for a pandemic cycle which has thrown off goals in progress?
Catherine, would you want to address performance planning?
Sure. So that's a great question. Actually, early on, we began talking to your HR liaisons and supervisors about modifying expectations in current plans, given that we all pivoted to remote, and given that our duties, our normal responsibilities in many cases have shifted drastically, and in other cases not so much. But so we've asked supervisors to be flexible, both in terms of revising duties and setting new expectations and doing that work collectively and collaboratively with you. The other advice that we've been giving to supervisors is to think about not focusing so much on duties and accomplishments this cycle, but to really focus on competencies. And by that, I mean how you're showing up at work in terms of your commitment, positivity, demonstrating the values of the campus, the university, and really how you go about doing your work and how you've pivoted to this new environment, and showing resilience and demonstrating strong character in those ways. We think that that's really a better way to evaluate people this way, or a supplemental way to evaluate people this cycle, rather than sort of the traditional sticking to, how well you performed each of your outlined duties. So you should be seeing some changes there. We are also really encouraging supervisors to engage in coaching, maybe more coaching than normal, to help people feel engaged and connected. So I'm hoping that you're seeing those things.
And Catherine, would it be fair to say that to the extent that people have goals that otherwise would not have been attainable during COVID, that we'll be providing guidance to supervisors to reevaluate goals in light of what was capable of being done within the COVID environment?
Yes, I think that was very well said. And we have been doing that, and we will continue to do that.
Great. Now, the next question is, will there be any retirement incentives for staff, or will such opportunities not go beyond faculty?
So, Catherine, you want to address?
Sure.
Natalie?
So we have had staff retirement incentives. They've been run a little differently than the faculty, which may be why some of you are not aware. What we did on the staff side was offer departments the ability, based on their business needs, really, to determine whether they as a department would offer the retirement incentive. So some departments have already done that. Some, I think, are still doing that as we speak, but they have been out there. It may be that you're in a department that, for budgetary reasons or business needs, has not been able to offer that, but we have had many staff across campus take the retirement incentive that their department has been able to offer.
So let me circle back, which is that departments have the flexibility to do it, but that we don't and probably won't have a campus-wide staff early retirement. Here's the program for that, where you could elect to take it in the same way that some of the academic departments have instituted it. It's really a departmental by departmental decision based upon their budgetary needs.
Great. This next question is about vaccinations. Pat, I know you touched a bit about this in your opening statement there, but this question is, will the vaccination play part of reopening the campus? Will it ever be mandatory? I thought we were part of phase 2 school staff. It sounds like we're not being grouped that way.
So the short answer is right now, vaccination is not playing much of a decision point in terms of what we're going to be doing for the spring. What we do know is that in terms of the prioritization, there is language within there that talks about people who interact directly with the public at work, such as grocery store workers and school staff. Really, because of what's been going on in the K-12 environment, they're going to be prioritizing K-12 staff much more than they would be looking at prioritizing higher education staff. We don't know exactly when that distribution timeframe is going to take place, and we're certainly going to advocate where we can for our faculty and staff to be able to get vaccination. But I don't see us getting that widely within the spring semester, and that it's really going to be the back end of spring and into summer when that's going to impact our community most.
Okay. This next question is, when the campus closes for inclement weather, but courses are still remote, what should staff do who support labs, OIT, etc.?
So this is a good example of a question that our policies have been able to answer very well until we pivoted to remote, and then it gets more complicated. And so just a reminder to everyone that we do have a campus closure during inclement weather policy that is still good guidance. So be aware that that's out there, and certainly check that out if you haven't. But in these individual circumstances where we've got a mixture of remote or maybe hybrid work, and we have a campus closure due to snow, there will be challenges about whether that person needs to do some work remotely or not. Normally when a campus closure happens, only those people that need to do snow removal, police, that sort of thing come to campus. The rest of us are asked to stay home to really keep off the roads during a snow closure is the primary reason. When we're already, a lot of us working remotely, that gets more complicated. And this question particularly goes to teaching remotely. And I don't know if classes will still happen if we have a campus closure. I think that's still a question I don't know the answer to. But assuming that is, you would need to work with your supervisor, and this is good guidance for all of you in this environment right now. Check first with your supervisor about whether it's needed. Obviously, if the class is happening and the teacher needs to be there, and in order for the class to happen and run smoothly, they need you working, and you're working remotely, then you're going to be needing to work remotely. I think each situation is going to be different, so I can't give you a blanket answer. The one part of this that I think I can answer is when others are getting administrative leave on a campus closure day, but you may have to work some hours, would you get compensated for those administrative leave hours at another time? And the answer is no. And I'll try to explain why. If we have a holiday and you have to work a holiday, then you would get that holiday at another time. Or if you receive recognition administrative leave, then you would receive, but you have to work that day. you would receive that administrative leave at another time. But a campus closure isn't really creating an administrative leave entitlement for all of us. It's really the way to manage not being able to come to work. And so some of us will still have to do some work on those campus closure days. Others not. It's really going to depend on the function in the unit, and we'll just have to be paying attention and working with your upline on that.
So let me supplement that answer just a little bit, which is that we're going to be working with academic affairs in order to be able to determine if there is a campus closure, what that means for instruction. When we were looking at this in the fall, we had academic affairs made a decision that if we had a campus closure, that it would not only affect those in-person classes, but that would also affect the remote classes, because we didn't want to have a hodgepodge of different instruction that was being offered and having people confused about what their obligations are. During that period when we're all remote, I believe that it's more likely than not that they will determine that it would be appropriate to have the remote instruction continue. If remote instruction is continuing, people who support that remote instruction would need to be available in order to do that, even if the campus itself was closed, in the sense that we wouldn't have people coming into campus to perform other job duties.
Great. This next question says, it's a great effort to offer more programming for staff, but many of us do not have the capacity to attend webinars or voluntary training. What support is available for us? Are supervisors actually being held accountable for adjusting workloads in response to the demands of remote work? My team is doing more work than ever, and more projects just keep coming, despite the fact that we're supposed to be doing less to accommodate the furlough and mental health needs.
So I appreciate the fact that people may not have either the bandwidth or the interest in doing additional remote programming when so much is already being asked of you, and certainly respect that. In terms of what the demands are, that's something that, yes, we've all I've talked to my team and expect my team to be able to communicate to their supervisors the need to be able to accommodate workloads, to be able to not have people burning out during this period of time. We don't have set guidance in terms of saying here's exactly how to manage that, because that workload has to be determined and balanced on a unit by unit basis. But it is really important for people to communicate what the demands are, and if the expectations are at the point where you're unable to be able to meet those without it having an adverse effect on your ability to be able to perform your duties, as well as being in a place where you're able to be productive and have decent mental health. So the only remedy for that is communication. And you also do need, and I've said it before, I'm going to reinforce it, you are entitled to your leave. If you are feeling burned out, if you feel like you need time, please take your days. They are there for that purpose. And one of the reasons that we've granted additional administrative leave is to be able to recognize the extraordinary amount of demand and work that has existed over the course of the last semester. And you need to use those, use the furlough days. And if there are situations where that's not being granted, please make sure that you work with HR to be able to address that, because those are your entitlements during this period of time and any period of time.
Great, thank you. I know we're getting close to time here. I'm going to try to ask just a couple more questions here. The next one is, when will it be decided if employees receive a merit increase in 2021? Would the university ever consider giving a higher amount than 3% to help staff with increased cost of living and the fact that we did not receive a merit increase this year?
So the short answer is that is something that we would have to take before the Board of Regents, and that the Board of Regents will approve, are responsible for approving whether or not there is a salary pool. We are going to be going to the Board of Regents and asking them to approve a salary pool this year, because we know that it was harmful not to be able to have it over the course of the last year. But I don't want to lead anybody astray. I believe that it would be unlikely that the board would approve anything more than a 3% salary pool. I think that's probably a realistic ask for us to be able to make. And that's if we can show them that our enrollments are good and that we can budgetarily do that. But this is one of our highest priorities, along with being able to reverse any of the furlough requirements, is to be able to address the needs of our workforce. So it's a budget priority for us that we're going to be taking forward in the spring.
Okay. I'm trying to find the next question here. Okay. All right. For percentage-based pay cuts and furloughs that impact staff in inequitable ways, 5% on a salary of $45,000 can be devastating, while 10% of $275,000 is unlikely to impact survival. Is there any serious discussion of higher paid staff taking a progressively higher percentage pay cut to help us all get through this budget crunch?
So far, the answer is no, we're not, that there hasn't been any discussion about a more progressive pay cut. And so I don't want to say that that's under discussion. Obviously, if our budget situation worsened, and we were going to be looking at any additional reductions, we would expect the leadership to step up first in doing that. And we're going to be looking at options to be able to support our staff and figuring out what we can do to reverse furloughs as quickly as we can. But that we've got to get a better idea of our budget situation coming into the spring semester to make sure that we're maintaining the overall fiscal health of the university. But like I said just a moment ago, that's one of our highest priorities. Where we've really focused so far is trying to be able to prevent layoffs and maintain continuity of employment for people. And we've tried to share that across the university. But I know that it's been a burden, and I apologize that we've been in that role throughout the course of this semester, because I know that it's been a burden.
All right, so it is 1:59. We do still have a lot of questions, but unfortunately that is all the time that we have. We, as staff council, will try to get the answers to some of these questions and put them out in a newsletter in the coming months here. The session has been recorded, and we will again send out communication as to where you can find that with the links and everything. But I just want to say thank you again to Pat and Catherine, and for everyone for jumping on and spending an hour with us. We hope it was informational and you guys are feeling a little bit better about moving into the next semester.
And thank you again. I really appreciate it. And really thank you for taking the time to ask the questions. I know that some of the answers were probably frustrating, but I want to be in a position where we're being as straightforward with you as we can. We owe you transparency and honesty, and we'll keep doing it. And if you have other sessions like this you want us to do in the spring, we'll be happy to do it and come back and chat with you anytime, because we were, I say this a lot, but I mean it, which is we hear a lot about the faculty and staff, or faculty and students, and the faculty are teaching and the students are taking the classes, but the university does not function and does not thrive without the staff, including all of you who are working remotely right now. And so you don't get appreciated as often as you should, as much as you should, but I really want to thank you for what you're doing. The university can't meet its mission without you, and I'm really grateful for all that you do not just in times of pandemic, but in normal times. You're the backbone of the institution, and we owe you a tremendous debt of thanks.
Great. All right. Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye.